Chapter 12. Rue made his way down the winding road. It once had been a well-cobbled path, wide enough for a wagon, but now much of it had disappeared under decades of dust and dirt. The only signs that remained of it were broken chunks of stonework, pushed up by hardy scrub and knotted tree roots. The boy moved carefully, often leaving the path to run down its edges. "I try to stay off the middle so I can see the tracks," he said over his shoulder. "Nobody has been here for ages." He smiled at Oni. The dhole had stuck his head out of the pack and was looking around in wonder. "You can be out here, but once we get near you have to hide again, okay?" Rue left the path and followed a narrow track into a small forest. Here the trees were twisted and gnarled, bent low by the rocky ground and shadow of the mountain. The boy moved at a crouch as the branches curled and intertwined over the rutted track, forming a web-like tunnel. It took him to a small clearing where the grass grew long. He paused there, hunched at the forest entrance. "I always come back this way," he whispered. "That way, if anyone follows me, they just think I live in the woods." Rue scanned the clearing. It was an abandoned yard. Old grey timber still sat in stacks, held together by large stakes driven into the ground. Long brown grass grew in the gaps between. "Someone tried to set up a timber yard here, but this wood is useless, too twisted and knotty." Rue was at his shoulder and nodded in understanding. "This is how I get into Rue continued. "I go by rooftop up there." He pointed to a ladder against a wall on the other side of the clearing. "I have to avoid the streets these days." The dhole poked Rue in the ear and motioned him to elaborate. The boy sighed and sat down. "Well, I was in a gang, Oni. Most orphans end up in a gang. I was in there for about a year, stealing and breaking into houses for them." The dhole gave a stern look, but Rue just shrugged. "I had to make a living. Anyway, I left and found work as a messenger. The problem is the leader of the gang hates me, because I kinda turned her into a cripple. That's why I have to sneak around now." Oni patted Rue on the shoulder in sympathy. "Thanks. Hopefully it will pass over one day. If not, I'll get out of here. I can't run around on the rooftops forever." Rue stood up. "Well, it looks clear. Let's go." They made their way up the ladder, and suddenly Rue was flying across the rooftops with Oni holding on tight to the straps of his pack. With each daring leap over the narrow alleyways, the dhole would let his legs trail behind him, holding on with one hand and floating for a heartbeat. Then he would land as Rue landed, regathering his grip on the bag, readying himself for the next jump. Rue could feel Oni's joy as they crossed the crooked town, and this drove him to run faster and leap higher. By the time they reached the edge of the marketplace, Rue was breathing heavily and smiling broadly. He crouched down in the shadows of a crumbling chimney. The market square was below, already bustling as merchants set up their stalls. "I like to get here early. Someone always has a message for someone, and the gangs usually work at night, sleep in the mornings." Oni had come to stand on Rue's shoulder and watch the scene below. The stores were arranged into grids, many nothing more than a bench with their merchandise piled on top. Some had set up walls made of cloth, and even a few had awnings. There were no customers at this stage. The shadow of the mountain still stretched across the square. All the hustle and bustle came from the merchants bringing in their goods, getting ready for the day. "There's Tinker Tok," said Rue, pointing. Oni tracked his finger. A small, wizened old man shuffled his way through the square. With his dark skin and the shock of pure white hair, he was easy to spot. "He's an Udai, like me. He was with the tribes when they lived on the plains, before the king scattered them." The dhole looked to the north. "Yes, out there somewhere. I'll go there one day. Tok told me there are still Udai on the plains, living the old way." The dhole nodded. "He gave me my first messenger job," said Rue with a small smile. "He caught me trying to steal a horse." Oni glanced up at the boy. "Oh, it was a little one, made of loops of silver." Rue smiled at the memory. "He might look old, but he's pretty fast. He caught me and wouldn't let go." Rue's voice changed to an odd, lilting tint. "Oh, a thief of the Udai, little colt. Our people have fallen far. You fall us down, even further." That's how he sounds. All the old Udai speak like that. Rue continued in the melodic accent. This must change, yes? You must rise. Lift the Udai. You work for horse. Make much character. Learn the straight. Rue smiled. That was a year ago. He gave me an errand to run and a few copper coins. Then some other merchants gave me work. Not all of them, even though I'm the fastest. They still don't trust me. It took me 6 months to earn that horse. Oni galloped around in a small circle. Well, you could ride it, I guess. It doesn't move, though. Oni stopped. He looked disappointed. I should take you to his workshop, though. He makes all sorts of wonderful toys. Some of those ones do move around. Oni nodded vigorously. He lets me sit with him while he works sometimes, but he teaches me to read while I'm there, which is a bit boring. I'm getting pretty good, though. Okay, you better hop in my pack, and I'll go give him the coin. Oni crawled into the pack as Rue lowered himself off the roof, dropping down onto a balcony. It will be a relief to get rid of it. The boy worked his way down 2 more balconies and landed lightly on the street. With a final look left and right, he stepped into a busy world of the market square. Most of the merchants recognised him as he weaved his way through the narrow pathways between stalls. Some smiled warmly or gave a "Morning, Rue" as they unloaded their goods. Others watched him with distrust. He had been in a gang, and he had been a known pickpocket in this area. Many merchants remember this and eyed him warily. A tall, angular man was laying out spices and waved in greeting. Got a couple of packets for the nobles district, lad. Rue nodded over his shoulder. I'll just finish up this delivery, Mr. Dale. The boy stepped around a large cart and then past a group of merchants discussing business. He spotted an elderly man with a long grey beard at one of the stalls. Rue swerved and made his way towards him. Morning, Mr. Caffey. The elderly man was stacking books onto a long table. Ah, young Rue, he said as he peered over his spectacles. 3 Carthian ships just reached port this morning. Carthian, you say? Refugees, you think? Rue shrugged. Great readers, the Carthians. Very cultured. He looked around the square. Waldorf! A small boy hurried over, pushing a wheelbarrow full of books. Oh, hello, Rue. Yes, Mr. Caffey? Empty these out, and let's put these in. The old man sorted through some of the books on his table. Cull's History of the Realm. Perfect for new arrivals. Navi's Book of Maps. Look, Rue. I have books written in Carthian. Could never sell them. Rue moved from foot to foot, eager to be on his way. Mr. Caffey smiled. Sorry, lad. Time is money indeed. Take any books from the basket and thank you for your information. Rue smiled as he quickly sorted through a crate of books. He found one and held it up hopefully to the old man. Ah, what's that one? The old man peered closer. Behind the Great Fall. Oh, a history book this time, Rue. Almost banned this one was, written by a mage. Yes, that'll be fine. Rue slipped the book into his pack, carefully avoiding the waving Oni. The corner of the WHISP board slipped out and Rue quickly covered it. Mr. Caffey was watching him. You be careful with that, Rue, he said, nodding at the bag. He then smiled, his eyes twinkling. It's a rare book you've got there. The old man turned to young Waldorf. Get these down to the docks. Set up outside those Carthian ships. Rue breathed a sigh of relief and moved on. He found Tok at his usual spot, carefully placing an assortment of pocket watches, gauges, weather instruments, compasses, and other gadgets on a small table. Morning, Tok. The small man turned and gave the boy a warm smile. Ah, Rue, there you be. You talk to the lady, yes? To Gerald. He gave me this for the doll you're working on. Rue handed over the gold coin. Ah, he found it, said the merchant as he squinted at the coin. Very rare, very good news. What is it? I've never seen a coin like it, said Rue. Tok swiftly placed it in a pouch. Not a coin, an artifact, made by the Blue Men. Adds much value. Rue leaned on the table and tapped on a compass. It was sometimes difficult to get a straight answer out of Tok. Much value? To the toy you're making. You mean it makes it more expensive? No, just adds value. Oh, said Rue with a frown. He decided a different tact. I saw some dolls yesterday, like the ones you make. Tok raised an eyebrow. Where you see this? In the Curse Town, said Rue casually. Tok picked up a gauge and polished it with his sleeve. Not good, Rue. Bad place. Should stay out. Fint chased me again. I didn't have much choice. She after artifact? She thought it was a gold coin, said Rue. Tok put the gauge down. This not good. Fint sniffing around, Bowl asking many questions. The Chris King stirs. Gerald said the same thing, said Rue. He was too scared to leave the Nobles district. He said Bowl was looking for wizards. Yes, I hear this. Maybe looking for more. Is Gerald a wizard? Asked Rue. Tok laughed. Just looks like one, which can be bad enough. You really think the Chris King will come? We will see. Rue nodded slowly. I wonder who he is. No one sees him, just his Kriska. When you see many, you know you have gone too far. Must make things right. If no one sees him, how can you know he's real? Plagues happen in other cities. Tok shrugged. You cross the line. You find out. You ask the Kriska. The merchant chuckled as he rummaged around in his pouch. He pulled out 2 dull coins. For you, for your good running. Thanks, said Rue as he took the copper pieces. Anything else you need? No, perhaps tomorrow. Maybe Gerald's piece. You take to him. You're almost finished, said Rue. Can I watch while you work on it tonight? Perhaps, for some of it. You bring a book. Rue sighed. Okay, I'll try and make it. And with a wave he moved off into the crowd. A short time later Rue sat on a rooftop, chewing on a fresh loaf of bread. It had cost him a copper, but it would last him all day. 2 Kriska watched him from the ledge. They were really everywhere in this town, so common that you stopped noticing them. If they were the eyes and the ears of the Chris King, then he would know everything that went on in Yore. Rue tore off a few pieces of bread and tossed it to them. It was considered good luck to treat them well. They both gathered up a crust and nibbled furiously, their wide owl-like eyes still on him. Rue quickly forgot about them. He had a full day ahead of him, a handful of messages to deliver all over the town, and several packets of exotic spices to drop off at the Nobles district. He looked over the market square as he ate, watching the sun creep across the top of the stalls as customers began to arrive. Oni sat beside him and pulled out Rue's new book. He was turning over the pages and happily looking at the hand-drawn pictures. Rue watched him with a thoughtful expression. He wasn't sure why he chose a history book. Normally he would choose an adventure story. His favourite was Malachi the trickster, who fooled a dragon into giving up all his treasure. Maybe it was because of this morning. He'd wanted to tell Oni more about the school, but realised he actually didn't know that much. He knew Yore was once a grand city, its school of magic was famous, and that a powerful Udo mage called Karul destroyed all of that in a war called the Great Fall. But that was about the extent of it. Rue did not like looking dim-witted, and that's why he learned to read in the first place. Oni stopped turning the pages. He was staring at a picture of a powerful-looking older man with piercing eyes. The doll reached out and tenderly touched the face of the drawing. He looked up at Rue and pointed to the words on the book. You want me to read that, Oni? Rue took it up and the doll climbed onto Rue's lap and settled in to look at the page. Rue paused, momentarily frozen by the familiarity of the doll. Ani looked up at him and pointed again to the book. Rue regained his concentration. "I'm not a very good reader," he said as he eyed the words. "Not like talk." Ani leaned forward and tapped on the words of the book. Okay. Rue cleared his throat and read. Kodan was the greatest of the mages and head of the school. Rue paused. "I always thought Karul was the head. Or did he used to be called Kodan?" The doll shook his head vigorously. He pointed at the picture and then gave Rue the thumbs up. "He was a good man." Ani nodded. "You knew him?" Again the doll nodded, this time a bit sadly. "Well, I've never heard of him." Rue continued to read. After the betrayal of his top pupil, the destruction of his school, the failure of his mages to stop Karul, almost losing the kingdom to the tyrant, and watching the banishment of magic, Kodan disappeared, never to be seen again. The king cursed his name and erased it from history. Rue trailed off. "Ah, I wonder what happened to him." He looked again at the picture. The head mage's eyes seemed to stare straight through him. "He sure looks tough." Ani leapt onto the rooftop and nodded. He strutted around with his arms wide, casting pretend spells all around him. "He was a powerful wizard?" Rue asked. The doll nodded again, but trailed off as something caught his eye. He scampered to the roof's edge and began to point frantically. Rue's eyes narrowed as he scanned the market square. "What is it, Ani? I can't see anything." The doll began running along the guttering of the roof, his button eye still locked onto something in the square. "Hey, where are you going?" Rue threw the book into his pack and took the last hurried bite from his bun. He set off after the scampering doll. He watched in horror as Ani leapt off the roof, landing on the awning below. The doll looked up at the startled boy and waved him to come down. "Get back up here," Rue whispered sharply. Instead, the doll began running across the awnings of the stalls. He was heading into the centre of the market square. "I knew this was a bad idea," muttered Rue as he lowered himself from the roof and hit the ground running. Ani was moving fast, and Rue could barely keep track of him as the doll leapt between awnings. Rue navigated the growing crowds as he tried to keep an eye on the doll overhead. He found himself running past Tok's stall. The small man was searching the area frantically. No, not good," he said, patting his clothes down. Gone. Rue watched Ani leap off a distant awning onto a drainpipe and begin climbing it. The boy's eyes narrowed. There was something standing above Ani, looking down from the rooftop. It gave a small startled leap as it realized it was being followed, and fled. As it turned, something gold caught in the sunlight. Rue set off at a sprint. Ani disappeared over the edge of the roof, and in a few moments Rue hit the wall at speed. He scaled in 3 lunging steps, his feet touching on a windowsill, a jutting brick, and then bunching up under him as his hands grasped the edge of the rooftop. He pushed off from the crouch and pulled himself over the lip, landing lightly. There were 2 dolls ahead of him, and they battled on a long piece of guttering that extended over a wide alleyway. Rue skidded to a stop. He knew this place well. The distance between the rooftops always surprised him, and the guttering was too flimsy for him to walk on. He could only watch anxiously as the 2 dolls fought on the narrow bridge, the hard cobbled street far below them. The other doll was long and snake-like, made up of a length of wooden balls. Its upper body was all spikes and hard angles. Nails had been driven crudely through its head, giving it a jagged mohawk. Rue's eyes narrowed. He had seen this doll somewhere before. The snake doll dropped the gold coin on the crossway and scampered over it. It had 2 wooden balls for hands, and these were also full of nails. It used these claws and slashed at the weaving doll. Ani ducked a vicious swipe and lashed out with a spinning kick, knocking the nailed one back. The 2 dolls squared up again, both ready to fight. A figure emerged on the other side of the rooftop, the limp in her walk unmistakable. It was Vint. The end of chapter 12. And as usual, if you like that, leave me a like and subscribe if you want more. Thank you for listening, and may the Chris King watch over you.